Well, it's been quite the stressful week for everyone except sports fans.
Israel and Iran accuse each other of breaking a ceasefire during the early hours of their truce.
This communist from New York someday gets elected. I can't believe that's happening. That's a terrible thing for our country, by the way. He's a communist.
People are throwing around these big words like nuclear holocaust and geopolitical tension. And last Friday, the term World War III was the highest search phrase on Google, behind least likely mid-sized U.S. city to get bombed by Iran, which used to be Austin, Texas, before being ruined by people pretending to be from Los Angeles. Simultaneously, before an already broken ceasefire was put in place by Senor Donald a couple days ago, we saw a dramatic splintering within the MAGA movement, with many people feeling like Trump's America First promise was being broken by bombing a foreign country on behalf of Israel while most Americans are struggling to get by. This resulted in Tucker Carlson's first dope moment in history, when he cooked Cancun Ted Cruz for being unable to provide a rough population estimate of Iran, among other things.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
And also, Trump said the F word. Peep this.
They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Anyways, this new round of Middle Eastern lose-lose theater began after Israel struck a uranium enrichment facility in the humble canyon-laden grotto of Natanz, Iran.
Closer look at the 3 Iranian nuclear sites that have been attacked by the U.S.,
where scientists were attempting to chef up a nuclear bomb. The strike wiped out essentially the entire upper echelon of Iran's military command, and as we mentioned in a previous episode, Iran is Israel's top op, as the kids say, due to their proxy funding of several prolific Islamic resistance movements like the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and of course Hamas in the Gaza Strip, where Israel has killed over 56,000 Palestinians since October 7, 2023, 80% of which were civilians and over half of which were children. As usual, the Israeli government has their own way of justifying these actions,
promising there would be no Palestinian state on his watch and whipping up fear on Facebook.
With the Gaza genocide, Israel's justification is squashing the existential threat posed by Hamas and groups like them by any means necessary. And with these preemptive strikes on Iran, it's to again eliminate the possibility of future global nuclear annihilation.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
After Israel's initial strike, Iran clapped back with ballistic missiles, some of which broke through the Iron Dome defense system and struck apartment buildings in Israel.
This is all small damage, but the real price is what's happening to the people of Israel.
Prompting more crossfire and ultimately the United States getting involved and personally striking 3 nuclear facilities on June 21st of this year.
They confirmed that 3 nuclear sites, Natanz, Ford, and Isfahan, were targeted by the air strikes of quote-unquote enemy.
This, no doubt, came after Netanyahu's suggestion to the Trump cabinet that Iran was merely months away from atomic capability, which, by the way, is something that Netanyahu has been saying since 2009, back when America was busy grieving the king of pop and developing a swine flu vaccine.
Iran has never given up its quest for nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Atomic bombs.
However, bluff or not, Netanyahu appears to place Iran in the same existential threat to world peace bucket as groups like Hamas, which is a sentiment that strikes a chord with many Americans like myself, who've been conditioned with the civilizational clash propaganda since 9/11, after which we were told that Al-Qaeda's grievance with the West was our ability to attend baseball games and wear bikinis, not the presence of U.S. military bases in the Arabian Peninsula or our military support of Israel. And just to be clear, I don't agree or condone any of Osama bin Laden's actions, and I can't really think of a single case where terrorism has been genuinely effective. But radical groups are almost always born from legitimate grievances that give militants the righteous high ground to carry out terror attacks. And I think that understanding why terror attacks happen is the only way to prevent them from happening in the future. This whole civilizational or religious clash nonsense that politicians of a dominant group use to make issues like the Israel-Palestine conflict seem ancient and unfixable is very deliberate, as it allows them to classify their ops as crazed savages with no ground to stand on, who could never be reasoned with and thus should either be eliminated or given the gift of modernity through occupation. And as for Netanyahu, without this existential clash smokescreen that is really easy to throw up when you're discussing Muslim-majority countries with the U.S., he'd be considered an enemy and a traitor to the U.S. After all, it was his testimony in 2002, delivered to U.S. Congress, that prompted the U.S. invasion of Iraq, where Netanyahu claimed, falsely, that Israel found evidence of nuclear weapons that had been manufactured by the Saddam Hussein regime.
This is a ruler who is rapidly expanding his arsenal of biological and chemical weapons. This is a dictator who has used these weapons of mass destruction against his subjects and his neighbors.
Of course, we know now there were no WMDs in Iraq, but the unnecessary invasion resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and thousands of U.S. service members. You'd think our government would be like, Netanyahu, what the fuck, man? You lied to us the whole time. So many of us died, and even more of them died, and now everybody hates us. Which they probably did say for a minute, but were seemingly thereafter sweet-talked back into compliance and thanked by Israel for their willingness to help chip away at that old existential threat, which now sounds more like Arab sovereignty and/or oil ownership. Anyways, whether I'm crazy or whether that's happening now again with Iran is to be determined in the future, but it does seem that unlike Saddam Hussein, Khamenei was at least in the process of enriching uranium, which overall sounds like a bad thing. It would be great if nobody had nuclear weapons at all. And while I do enjoy, virtual walks through the Mojave Wasteland in Fallout New Vegas, radiation sounds like an L, chat. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Callaghan, and you're watching Fivecast, a broadcast here at Channel 5, the largest crowd-funded newsroom on Earth. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, I'd like to remind you guys, this broadcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and a few other platforms. So if you want to head over and give us a nice review, a listen, whatever, just type in Fivecast in all caps, and you should see this pretty little logo with some autumn trees behind it. That's ours. In this episode, for our infield segment, our Middle Eastern correspondent, Agat Schwartz, will be on the streets of Tel Aviv, Israel, where the Pride Parade was ruined by ballistic missiles.
Unfortunately, the Pride Parade didn't happen. I love the party. Usually, this place is pumping.
After that, we're gonna sit down with Channel 5 guest professor of Middle Eastern Studies, aka James Gelvin, America's Professor, to talk about the history of Iranian society from the days of the Shah through the Islamic Revolution in 1978 up until now. Thanks so much for joining us once again. We're also going to get Gelvin's genuine take on the possibility of World War III going down throughout this century. Do you think that, you can imagine a nuclear bomb being dropped anywhere in the world in the next 20 or 30 years? But first, and perhaps now more than ever, I think we need to hear a couple positive news stories.
We here at Channel 5 think the world needs to hear some good news. Maybe now more than ever, so let's get into it. Did you guys know that cooking-related mishaps are the leading cause of house fires in the United States, and that most people flee when that open flame gets out of control, leaving their pets, their loved ones, whoever else might be in the house, to fend for themselves and to lean on the fire department to clean up the mess? Well, the opposite is true for a 7th grader from Petersburg, Virginia, named Romir Parker. It all started when Romir was in his bedroom one night and heard something strange downstairs. You guessed it, a house fire was going up in the kitchen. Probably because someone left the stove on, but Romir had no time to play the blame game. He sprung into action. He grabbed his little brother and his little sister, who were just 1 and 2 years old, who were dead asleep on the couch watching Paw Patrol. I don't know, pretty crazy to leave a 1-year-old alone on the couch, in my opinion, right? But whatever. He saved them. He picked them up, had one in each arm, and carried them to safety while the flames grew and grew. And to keep it real, Romir would have been a Purple Heart hero just then and there alone, you know what I mean, with rescuing those 2 babies. But he wasn't done. Realizing his grandmother was still inside, he ran back in to help her get out too, while calling the fire department at the same time. The Petersburg Fire Department says the house could have gone up with everyone still in it if it wasn't for Romir's fast thinking. Fire Chief Wayne Hoover even made him an honorary firefighter on the spot and said there's a job waiting for him the day he turns 18, which is great news in the context of a city with a 21% poverty rate. Romir, if you're watching this, salute to you, and shout out to your arms for being strong enough to carry 2 babies at once. I carry 1 baby, and it sucks. It's just hard to do. They move around a lot, You're a hero, for real. Mobbing through a cloud of smoke, a wall of smoke, with 2 babies and a grandma. Our next story brings us across the pond to the old country of Ireland, which has been making waves in the news lately for all the wrong reasons.
A leisure centre has been set on fire in the town of Larne in Northern Ireland this evening.
Others say tension around immigration has been building in this community for some time.
But our brothers in green just took a serious W that will ensure respiratory health for many future generations of Callaghans, Gallaghers, and O'Briens. The country's last remaining coal-burning plant, Money Point, located in County Clare, is officially shutting down its smoggy operations as Ireland pivots towards renewable energy sources. Built in the 1980s as a backup plan during the oil crisis, Money Point will now shift to being an emergency oil reserve with plans to cease that by 2029. After that, they have no plans, so I hope to see Money Point as a Gaelic revival academy or maybe a sick-ass water park in the future. My grandfather always said, you're never too old for an inner tube. For real though. Shout out Ireland, now officially the 15th European nation to kick coal out of its energy mix. No one's free until all 32 counties are free. Shout out to Kneecap. Now to the streets of Tel Aviv, Israel, where Agash Schwartz is providing us with coverage following ballistic missile strikes from Iran.
We are the chosen people. We're ready for whatever, and Israel will not fall. And that's straight up. We are the chosen people. We will not fall. Bibi,
Israel.
keep going. Bibi, keep going. I am pro-BB all the way, all the way. And I'm happy Trump's in power, and I know Bibi and Trump, they're good friends. America has our back. We need to go hard. We should show them we're not scared. Enough is enough.
Hi everyone, this is Agat, and we are at the Pride Parade in Tel Aviv, Israel. Except that we're not, because it got cancelled.
The much-anticipated Tel Aviv Pride Parade was canceled as Israel braces for a potential retaliatory strike from Iran.
Unfortunately, the Pride Parade didn't happen, and it happened a bit, but it wasn't like how it used to be.
Did you plan to party?
Every time, I love to party. Usually, this place is pumping.
Makes sense that it's canceled. It was risky. I think it was even risky before the Iranian attacks happened.
I'm upset that it was canceled. I was actually really excited. It just sucks that it didn't happen.
It would have been my first one, so I was looking forward to it, you know?
Yeah, but look, there's more important things that matter, so I'd rather be safe than in a big crowd and all that.
מה אתה חושב על המצעד שהוא התבטל עכשיו בסופש?
מעולה, מדהים. אלוהים שלח עלינו את הטילים האלה בשביל לבטל אותו.
אתה חושב שזה טוב שהמצעד יתבטל?
משמעית.
למה?
למה אנחנו צריכים את זה? למה אנחנו צריכים אנשים ערומים על משאיות? למה?
אתה לא אוהב את זה?
לא.
But I'm the optimistic one. I think when things are gonna get better, we're gonna have the party we deserve.
I think at some point we all were hoping, like, you know, to happen. It's a big thing for us. It's a big thing for all the people that came from abroad.
כוס אימא של כל מי שבא מחול.
קייטלין ג'נר הגיע.
The Israeli people are very open-minded. They're friendly.
כוס אימא שלה. אם תראי את זה, יא בת זונה, יא מזדנת בתחת. כוס של האימא שלך, לכי תעשי מספריים, יא בת זון.
מה זה לכי תעשי מספריים?
היא לסבית, מה היא באה למצעד הגאווה? אף אחד לא רוצה לראות את זה.
So this was supposed to be an episode about the Pride Parade in Tel Aviv that was supposed to happen this weekend. But unfortunately, reality hits hard in the Middle East, and this is what we get. A war between Iran and Israel.
The new waves of attacks between Israel and Iran.
The arch-rivals have been locked in battle, launching tit-for-tat strikes.
This evening we watched as Iran fired its weapons at the prime target that is downtown Tel Aviv.
The deaths and destruction mounting on both sides.
The Iranian Ministry of Health says 224 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes.
In Israel, officials say 24 people have died in ballistic missile attacks.
The question will be, how much pain are they prepared to bear if this goes on for a long time?
Do you know there's a war going on right now?
Yeah, I know. You see, now we don't see
Anything in
the sky, yeah. I think now it's okay.
I feel like we've been living different catastrophes all the time. Like when it came, it was COVID, then the war, now this. So we're kind of like getting used to it.
This is like how life is here. Good or bad, you get used to, like, this is the drill, this is what you have to do. You just go, you take shelter, and then a few minutes after, life goes back to as normal as it can be.
I wasn't even scared. I was more sort of stressed about the unknown. Because we're just sitting in a safe room, checking my phone every 5 minutes, hearing, oh, there's a thing that hit somewhere, don't know anything about what's going on. So that was the scary bit, but besides that, it was fine.
Beautiful day, but we're ready for tonight.
What's tonight?
Tonight, I reckon there's going to be another wave of
missiles from Iran.
Fucking oath.
Yeah, so you're used to all this mess.
I am used to all this mess.
What do you think about this specific mess?
This specific mess is going to get hectic, so that's why I'm enjoying the scenery right now, because in a couple hours, I reckon it's all going to pop off again.
Maybe in the night, it's be dangerous.
Tonight, Israel and Iran are at war.
For days, Israel's defenses have largely held up against Iran's missile attacks.
But local television networks are reporting unprecedented consequences in terms of damage and destruction.
I think that this picture
is telling all the story. As you may see, all the buildings around got hit, not just the one who got the bomb on it. All the window shutters and the windows everywhere are finished.
I live over there, so all the bomb get inside to my house, the glasses.
The glass is broke in your house.
Yeah, but we thank God we have been in the mamad, in the safe room. It's safe life.
We heard the alarm and then we went to the shelter. It was really, really terrifying because it was a big bomb. And this is all small damage, but the real price is what's happening to the people of Israel. I'm very proud of the Israeli army and the Israeli Mossad, and they're going to make the Middle East a better place in a few weeks. So maybe the pain and the suffer is worth it.
Iran is, I think, the only country in the world that said, we are going to destroy Israel. Iran says it all the time, it repeats it, and we believe that. We all agree that there should have been done something even before. And if it's done now, it's better late than never. Because if they had a nuclear weapon now, they would have. There's no doubt about it.
We know that nuclears are not for use. And if Iran will have a nuclear bomb, then we have a serious problem because they will use it. Then it's a problem not just for the Middle East, it's a problem for the world.
I don't think they really, except for the United States, really understand the consequences of Iran being a country with a missile weapon. And for years we've been trying to stop their progress because they are threatening to destroy us and we can't let that happen.
There really need to be a very big change. We need to unite. Countries need to help each other and not to fight each other. And most of the people in Israel believe the same way. So I have a very big hope.
So even though your house was ruined, you're relatively happy about the thing because you think it will lead to a better future.
Well, I'm not happy because we lost so many lives, and I'm not happy because there are many people that are suffering, but I have to be happy and I have to get hope for my children to get a better world. After I will wipe my tears, I will be very happy for them because we'll get a better place. We'll get a better country, a better Middle East, and a better world.
What do you think about the parade that got cancelled, the Pride Parade?
I'm very sad that it was cancelled. I'm happy that there is a parade, and usually there is a parade in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is known to be a town or city that advocates for gays. So I'm sad that it was cancelled, but there was no other choice.
Yeah.
And my motto is live and let live.
That's a good motto.
Yeah, tell that to the Iranians.
Thanks to God again for your on-the-ground reporting. And now to our big sit-down interview of the day. As mentioned, Andrew will be sitting down with UCLA Middle Eastern Studies professor and frequent Channel 5 guest, Dr. James Gelvin, for an in-depth expert analysis of the situation unfolding in the Middle East. Here's that.
Thanks so much for joining us once
Thank
again.
you for having me.
You officially have the most recurring Channel 5 appearances of any guest of all time. It used to be a man named Crip Mac. Who's a very different person than you in terms of what he enjoys discussing.
It get real tricky, it get real Mickey, it get real dangerous. Never commit suicide. Everything's gonna see all right. Where I'm from, you're a customer if you don't fight back. It don't say if you win or lose, you're a customer if you don't fight back. Heard I got his hood whacked. Gotta knock him out. He ain't like that. On hood.
However, you've now surpassed him.
Oh, there we go.
For appearance number 5.
Okay.
So for starters, what's going on right now?
What's going on is that the United States has intervened into this conflict between Iran and Israel and launched attacks on nuclear facilities over the last couple of days. And we don't know the extent to which that they were able to destroy nuclear facilities or just damage them or whatever. And recently, Iran has decided to retaliate by hitting an American base in Qatar.
Anybody die?
Not that I know of so far. I mean, this is brand new stuff. The Americans have been sort of like tipped off about this. They knew about this, that this was going to happen. The bases were on high alert. So we don't know that any casualties would really have taken place.
How many military bases do we have in the Middle East?
We have a lot. We have a lot. This one is Qatar. We also have one in Kuwait. We also have in Iraq. We also have in various other places as well. So we have them scattered out mostly in the Gulf, and they are both Air Force bases and naval bases.
And that's something that's been a big point of contention in the Middle East for quite some time.
Well, it was a major point of contention in the 1950s, believe it or not, in the early 1960s. Not so much anymore. The Gulf actually wants to have American presence there simply because that is a guarantee. And it used to be that the big enemy was Iran. It's not quite the same thing right now because there's a détente between the Gulf countries and Iran. But this gives them a sense of security that the Americans are there.
So we struck Iran in solidarity with Israel.
We struck Iran, yes, in solidarity with Israel. I'm not quite sure exactly what the whole basis of what we were doing is all about. I mean, here's the thing. The Israelis are very, very good at tactics, but they're very, very bad at strategy. And so in terms of tactics, they were able to launch drones from inside Iranian territory. They were able to coordinate very complex aerial maneuvers. And then to what end? They've never defined their end. So at various points, they said, we want to degrade Iran's capacity to build a nuclear weapon. We want to destroy Iran's capacity to build a nuclear weapon. We want a regime change. No, we don't want a regime change. Yes, we do want a regime change. So it's like what happened with Gaza, which is that it's easy to get in, it's easy to kill people, but it's not so easy to define what you ultimately want to do and how you get out.
Mm-hmm. Last time I was here, we talked about something called the axis of resistance, right, which is this sort of economic and political link between Iran and various non-state entities throughout the Middle East, right. The Houthis, Hamas, etc. And so is Israel's motif in attacking Iran in the first place, does that have to do with the idea of retribution for October 7th?
It has to do with the opportunity is there now. Since October 7th, you look at it this way, Hezbollah has been very much downgraded. So has Hamas. The Syrian government was overthrown. You have a new Syrian government there.
At long last, the Assad regime has fallen.
All you have is the Houthis that are left, and the Houthis have interests of their own in the region. So the Israelis were able last October to knock out the Iranian air defense system. So why not? This is a chance that the Israelis have to get rid of what they consider to be their biggest competitor in the region.
Mm-hmm. Competitor in what regard?
Well, Israel and the American allies and the United States are status quo states in the region. Iran doesn't like the status quo. It's tilted against Iran. So what Iran has been able to do has been to sort of build up a deterrent force that would prevent Israeli strikes against Iran by having the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas and the Syrians and so on and so forth in this ring of fire. Well, that ring of fire is gone now. So what's to prevent the Israelis from finally dealing with the Iranians in a way that will make it once and for all, which is exactly what the Israelis are looking at right now.
And their biggest fear is Iran developing nuclear weapons capacity.
Their claim is that their fear is for Iran to build a nuclear weapons capacity. I mean, they've been crying wolf since 1992, however. Iran is on the verge, 1992. Iran is on the verge, 2012. You probably might remember the picture that Benjamin Netanyahu held up at the United Nations, the Wile E. Coyote bomb picture. At this point, what Netanyahu is saying is that they're closer and closer and closer. But the Tulsi Gabbard, when she gave testimony, said that Iran is really not as close as is being said. She was slapped down pretty hard by Donald Trump.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
So that, we don't really know how close Iran is. We do know that Iran has some uranium and 60% enrichment. 90% is necessary for a bomb, and that can be reached fairly quickly. But it doesn't have the other components for the bomb yet. And so it ranges now from 3 years to 5 years in terms of lead time for Iran to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. So it's pretty hard to make a nuclear bomb.
It's very difficult to make a nuclear bomb. More people have done it. But the thing is that it's just as difficult to deploy a nuclear bomb. I mean, not to send it somewhere. That's fairly easy. But to use it is something that you don't want to do. It's a good deterrent, which is what Iran really is looking at right now, I'm sure. The idea being that, well, we used to have Hamas, Hezbollah, the Syrian regime, the Houthis, et cetera, as our deterrent that could strike Israel. We don't have that anymore. So what deterrent do we have to make sure that Israel doesn't hit us really hard? Well, we have the possibility of a nuclear weapon. So if I were Iran, what I'd be doing right now is I'd be making some motion, which apparently is what they did today, of striking Qatar, striking American bases in the region, Qatar, Kuwait, some base like that. And then, making sure the damage is not too great, and then scurrying like hell to make sure that they can build a nuclear weapon as quickly as possible to restore deterrence.
So posturing that you have a nuclear weapon, even if you don't, gives you an advantage in negotiation.
It's not good to posture if you don't. It's good to posture if you do have it, in negotiation. But not just negotiations. It's that, everybody knows the Israelis have a nuclear weapon, which is why it's fairly unreasonable to think that, some power is going to strike Israel in an existential way. Now, you don't use these sort of nuclear weapons for lesser conflicts. And when I say lesser conflicts, I don't mean that, for example, on October 7th, people didn't die. They did. But what I mean is that there was no existential threat to Israel on October 7th. The Israelis pulled out the nuclear option once, and that was in 1973, when the head of the Israeli army, Moshe Dayan, said that it looks like the third temple is going to go down. And everybody read that as saying that it looks like we are under existential threat from Egypt and from Syria, and so therefore what we're going to do is we're going to use our nuclear weapons now that we have them.
Yeah. But I assume that there's a specific higher degree of fear in Israel because one nuclear weapon, if a bomb was dropped, could basically destroy the country. Isn't it like the size of Connecticut?
Well, yeah, it's very, very small. But I mean, the thing, of course, is that once nuclear weapons are deployed, that's the end of the story.
End of human civilization.
No, end of this particular story. I mean, not the end of human civilization. Look, we've had conflicts before between nuclear powers. We've had conflicts, for example, in the 1960s between the Soviet Union and China. China developed a nuclear weapon and a nuclear capability during its Cultural Revolution, but it wasn't crazy enough to use it even then. And then you have Pakistan and India, for example, both nuclear armed powers. They've been constantly back and forth over Kashmir. Now, why don't they go for the nuclear weapons? Because that's it. You pull out the nuclear weapon and the other guy pulls out his nuclear weapon and you're finished. So fundamentally, you keep it at a level below that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, you can imagine a nuclear bomb being dropped anywhere in the world in the next 20 or 30 years?
20 or 30 years is a long way out. So I have no idea whether...
Let's say 5 years.
5 years. I doubt that that's going to happen. Basically, the big fear, of course, is non-state actors that act differently than states. I mean, for example, Iran is a state. And there's this thing about Iran that, it's a state that's a millenarial cult, that, they, don't care if they live or die, and that's bullshit. Yeah. Iran is a nation state like any other nation state, and they have their own concerns. They have their population, they have, administration, they have a bureaucracy, they have an economy, and so on and so forth. Now, it would be very, very different if Iran was like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or a place like that, in which it doesn't have a homeland to defend. And so Al-Qaeda, the big fear after 2001, after 9/11, was Al-Qaeda would get some sort of weapon of mass destruction. And that would be, the rules would change.
Yeah. It seems like historically the U.S. uses this idea of nuclear capability as a justification for various military actions in the Middle East, notably the Iraq War.
Yeah, basically that was known to be pretty much of a sham. I mean, we went through excuse after excuse after excuse on that one. We ended up with, Iran will become a beacon of freedom in the Middle East, and we see how well that's worked. But, the real stretch when the head of the CIA said it's a slam dunk that Iran has weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They were bluffing about weapons of mass destruction, which gets us back to your point, which is that it's no good to bluff, because when you bluff, somebody might call you on it.
Right. So do you think there might be a hidden agenda in the military aggression on Iran?
I think that what happened was Benjamin Netanyahu got on the telephone to Donald Trump and said, look, you can be on the side of history at this point. You can make history. We can just change the entire Middle East like you weren't able to do in 2003. And all that means is you're helping us out on this one. What we'll be able to do is to ensure that we have a next American century in the Middle East. And I think that Donald Trump is enough of a sucker to have fallen for that.
Yeah, you mentioned before that you feel like Netanyahu kind of is playing Donald Trump. playing on his false perceptions of things out there.
Yeah, and basically, I mean, what moves Donald Trump? Well, a couple of things. The idea of political gain, his admiration for strongmen, the idea that he could win a Nobel Prize now, the idea that he could undo what Joe Biden and what Barack Obama did. I mean, remember, Obama was the guy who got us into the nuclear deal with Iran. It was Trump who got us out of that deal. And it was because of that Trump got us out of the deal that we're in the situation that we're in today.
What other American enemies have nuclear capabilities?
Well, of course, if you want to put them in the enemy category, there's Russia, there's China.
I've heard something about North Korea, too.
Well, North Korea, definitely. I forgot that one, of course, The North Korean is pretty much very different from China and from Russia. North Korea acts a bit more irrationally than China and Russia. I mean, even in the case of Israel and Iran, both of those countries have acted fairly reasonably, or not reasonably, but have acted rationally, in this leading up to this confrontation and in this confrontation. I mean, it's not like either country is going to deploy nuclear weapons immediately against the other country. They both have assets that they want to protect. They have a homeland that they want to defend. So they're reasonable in that way. And the same way with China, same way with Russia. North Korea, on the other hand, is a totally different story. We don't know.
I guess the point that I was getting at is that, is it safe to say that nuclear power is generally wielded by the West?
Well, the West does have a significant number of countries that have it. We have, Britain, for example. We have France. We have the United States, et cetera, et cetera.
So we're kind of the nuclear boogeyman to them in certain ways.
Yeah, but there's a difference between us and them in as much as they can count on the United States to defend the status quo. And they can count on America's North Atlantic allies to defend the status quo. They are not the status quo powers. They are not happy with the way the status quo is. This is why Russia went into Ukraine, for example. It wasn't happy with the way things were developing. But the idea that Ukraine might join NATO, for example, or the idea that Ukraine might pull closer to the West, even if it wasn't going to join NATO. So what they want to do is to upset that status quo. China is, breathing down the neck of the United States at the present time as the greatest economic power, as the hegemon in various parts of the world, and so on and so forth. Their Belt and Road, project is, integrating a world economy around China. So that America's got the default currency. For example, the world reserve currency is the dollar. The America is still the world's greatest economic power. But China wants to move into that sort of position.
So is there a natural resource, incentive for the U.S. to have such a strong presence in the Middle East that goes beyond political power?
Well, the oil in the Middle East, of course, is important. But I mean, the thing about the oil is that it was never really that essential for the United States. It was essential for two things. It was essential for American allies. I mean, Japan gets more than 90% of its oil from the Middle East. I mean, America gets very, very little amount. It's like 17%, and that's replaceable as well. And the other thing is that, a chaos in the oil market means chaos in the world economy, which is hurtful to the United States. So it's those two things that make it so important. So when the Iranians, have the capability of, for example, blocking the Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 30% of the world's oil travels, then the United States sits up and takes notice on that sort of thing.
So backing up a bit before Israel struck Iran and before we did, there were some strikes that were launched by Iran into Israel, no?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, after Israel launched its strikes on June 13th, the Iranians launched their strikes into Israel as well. They haven't been as successful as the Israeli strikes. The Israelis have, anti-missile defenses better than the Iranians have. But the strikes didn't occur until after Israel launched its own attacks on the 13th.
What's up, people? Let's take a quick break to see how the media has been covering the ceasefire that Trump brokered in the Middle East that neither party seems to really be respecting, which is why Trump said the F word. As we know, different outlets push different agendas, shaping the story to fit their own narratives, which is why independent reporting matters, and we here at Channel 5 are 100% committed to bringing y'all raw, unfiltered coverage straight from the streets. But before we hit the streets, we like to get informed, using what, you might ask? Ground News. Ground News is a dope-ass news aggregate that lets you see exactly how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story as it unfolds. Here, as you can see, using the Ground News bias distribution tool, the left and right are covering the supposed ceasefire quite differently. And I'm sure things may change by the time this is released, because it's recorded like 3 days before. The left-leaning LA Times headline reads, "Trump says says Israel-Iran ceasefire is in effect after deal initially faltered, while the right-leaning publication The Spectator headline reads, Trump shouldn't blame Israel for ceasefire skirmish. Not too hard to spot the bias there. Ground news. Another thing that I love about ground news is how it helps you figure out what's genuinely newsworthy by showing you how many sources are covering a specific story. That kind of transparency helps you clock if an article's legit or just some nonsense born in a corporate echo chamber to manipulate the algorithm and generate ad revenue by lying to you and getting you upset. I hate that. Ground news. Another feature I love to use, the blind spot tool, which shows me the stories that might not be appearing on my typical media bubble. Wow, that kind of stuff is why we trust Ground News to help us cut straight through the noise. And right now, you can subscribe for a 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan, bringing the cost down to less than $5 a month. What a deal. Just scan the QR code here or click the link below to sign up. Supporting Ground News means helping to support us, which means that we can keep making videos like this, giving y'all coverage that isn't watered down or dictated by corporate interests. So check it out, stay informed, and most importantly, don't let the media tell you what to think. I mean, they must have been pretty well orchestrated because they were able to get past the Iron Dome and hit apartment buildings in Tel Aviv, no?
Yeah, but you can, I assume that, first of all, it's more difficult to knock down ballistic missiles than it is to knock down drones. And the last attack was mainly drones. I mean, initially, on the 13th or so, the Iranians sent over about 300 drones or so, and they were pretty much easily knocked out of the sky. Ballistic missiles go up very, very high. They come down very, very quickly, and so it's more difficult to get them. So they were able to hit targets in Tel Aviv, but they were also knocked out. There are multiple layers to the anti-ballistic missile defenses. So, this is the way that you have an integrated defense.
Yeah, it definitely kind of ruined Pride Month in Tel Aviv.
I'll bet it did.
What's up with how people in Israel always act absolutely baffled as to why people are ever attacking them? And this is not an attack on the Israeli citizenry, but every interview is like, what the hell's going on? They're like looking at the buildings. Are they just not aware of the actions of their government? Or are they just, I don't understand psychologically what's happening there.
I assume that the Israelis could foresee, for example, things like if they struck Iran, that Iran would strike back. The October 7th was a surprise to them. They thought they had everything under control. In the same way that they thought in the beginning of the 1973 war that they had everything under control. Everything was cool, it was fine, we can just keep on going in the status quo. And this is probably why October 7th took place, was the idea that there was a status quo that had been reached, which was that the Israelis would allow Hamas to maintain its governance of Gaza, and that Hamas would remain within its borders, and that the Palestine question would just drop off the horizon. And, so Israel was making these deals of normalization with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Sudan, and everybody was ignoring the Palestine question. Now, when you ignore the Palestine question, that's when we get these militant activities taking place, that the Palestinians want to reassert this back into the international agenda. And that's exactly what they did. And they did this in the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s as well.
Mm-hmm. So to move all the way back, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Iran, moving back to the 70s and even before. So I grew up on the West Coast with a lot of Persian people and stuff like that. Is Persian the same thing as Iranian?
Persian is the name of Iran before 1935. Then in 1935, the ambassador in Germany, the Persian ambassador in Germany, wrote to the Shah of Iran saying, look, fundamentally we should change our name to Iran, back to, this one, which was a province of Persia, Iran. And the idea being that we could demonstrate to the Germans that we're different from the Jews, the Semites, that we're Aryan just like they are. And this is how, starting in 1935, the Persian Empire became Iran.
So they were supporters of the Third Reich?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the Shah of Iran, the guy who actually set up the modern Iranian state in the 1920s, was deposed by the British in the 1940s for being pro-Axis. And they put his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, in charge to become Shah of Iran. And he was the last Shah of Iran, and deposed in 1979.
So after, the Nazis lost the war, was there a similar migration to Iran like there was to Argentina?
Of Nazis, not that I'm aware. There was interestingly, there was a Jewish migration to Iran during the war. And the Iranians were very open to taking Jews, European Jews, into Iran. Same way that the Ottomans were centuries and centuries before that. The idea being that, hey, these are people that we need, so why not give them a home?
Sounds a little awkward, right?
It does now, we're looking back on it, but yeah.
Yeah, most of the Persians that I grew up around kind of have the same vibe as Miami Cubans, where they have a lot of pride, ethnic pride in regards to like their lineage, but they speak very negatively about the current regime in the country they immigrated from.
Right. There were multiple immigrations from Iran, though. The first one was a political immigration. We see a lot of people who were associated with the regime, students who didn't go back home, people like that. And then after that, you began to have economic refugees, family reunification, and that sort of thing as well. So what we saw in the very beginning was very, very strong anti-Islamic Republic ideas, tapering off a bit. Now, we still play host, for example, to the pretender to the throne of Iran, who is in and out of Los Angeles, fundraising and that sort of thing. So he is somebody who has a great deal more support among Iranians in Los Angeles than he has among Iranians in Tehran, for example.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Cuban thing in Miami.
Well, they tell these stories about, they broadcast these propaganda things from the pretender to the throne of Iran into Iran, and the Iranians like to listen to it because for them it's like a joke. Yeah. So, basically for them it's sort of like, how unrealistic can you possibly be?
For people who don't know what's going on in Iran, I kind of want to go back to that year 1978, which is the year of the Islamic Revolution.
Right, 78, 79, yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a friend growing up, he was Baha'i, which is a minority faith group in Iran, and they had this framed photo of themselves on the streets of Iran wearing bell-bottom jeans and dressed like they were in the Scooby-Doo series, the Scooby-Doo movie that was a real-life adaptation where Shaggy was dressed like, the 70s style with Velma and the ascots and stuff. So they would always point to that
Don't tell
picture.
me you never had bell-bottom jeans.
I have never had bell-bottom jeans. I grew up in the sort of the baggy jean and then high water era, and now we're going to standard workwear. Well, I have worn bell-bottom jeans at one point, but I was lampooned for it in middle school.
Yeah, okay. What happened in the Iranian Revolution? The Iranian Revolution was a real revolution. And it was first of the great people power revolutions. When we see those throughout East Asia, we see those in the Arab uprisings were part of that thing. The first Intifada in Palestine was part of this thing, where rather than having these small groups of people, a Leninist style, trying to overthrow the regime through armed force, what you had was these masses out on the street. And the thing about when you have these masses out on the street, it's more effective because it doesn't get the backs up of the regime. So let's say a policeman in Tehran could say, those are my kids out there. I'm not going to shoot these people.
So prior to the Islamic Revolution, the Shah was in power. Was he democratically elected or anything like that?
No, he was the king. He was, or the emperor. I was once corrected by the current pretender to the throne. When I called him Your Royal Highness, he corrected me as saying, no, you mean Your Imperial Highness. He was the Shah of Iran, and it's a hereditary monarchy. So it's his son who's now the pretender to the throne.
Was his son like an Uday Hussein type of guy? Just a total piece of shit?
Let's just put it, he's very unrealistic about what he wants to do.
And he was supposed to be the successor to the Shah.
Right.
So was his behavior and his lack of vision part of what fueled the uprising?
No. The Shah, the thing was, fundamentally, this was an anti-imperialist uprising. The Shah was too close to the Americans. The Shah was extraordinarily repressive. In Iran was also sort of like extraordinarily corrupt. The government was extraordinarily corrupt. So the family of the Shah and his hangers-on were, extraordinarily unpopular for that reason as well. So there's all sorts of reasons why these things happen. But you see, revolutions are overcaused. And as a matter of fact, what we can say is revolutions are not really caused at all. When I talk to my students about revolutions, I always talk to them about, the 3 C's of revolutions. There is the contingent event that takes place, there is the context for the revolution, and there's consciousness. The context is what we always talk about. Well, you have, repression, you have hunger, you have, corruption, you have this, that, and the other thing. But unless they enter into your mind as something that is totally wrong, and so all of a sudden the corruption becomes a real issue, or repression becomes a real issue. That's what I mean by consciousness. That, it's always there, you could always find it there. Income differentials or things like that. But when people say this is unjust and I have to do something about it, it's that doing something about it that causes a revolution.
Yeah, one thing that Liam mentioned too is that back in the 70s and the 60s, before the genesis of major, what's seen as like Arab wealth, like places like Dubai and stuff, there was a big idea of Islam and kind of the resistance movement being a part of the broader global peace movement.
Well, Islam wasn't really an extraordinary factor until the 1970s, and it had to do with the oil. It had to do with the Saudis began to build all sorts of academies and mosques and so on and so forth. Mosque construction, for example, in Gaza just went through the roof after the 1973 oil price highs, because these places actually had two things. They had wealth that they could spend, and they also had a specific type of Islam that they wanted to expand. And their Islam was a very, very puritanical Islam. It was an Islam that said fundamentally, wait a minute, Muslims shouldn't enter into politics, they should sit on their hands. And so what happened was that you get a lot of these groups that emerged in the 1970s as a result of oil wealth that the Saudis, Kuwaitis, and other people were pouring into various countries. This is where the Taliban comes from. The Taliban comes from these academies that the Saudis had set up in Pakistan. And that the Afghanis who became part of the Taliban went to these academies. They learned from the madrasa, and this is where we get the word Taliban from. Students, exactly.
Yeah. What was Khomeini's version of Islam?
Khomeini, there's fundamentally the play that you can have within Islam depends upon which branch of Islam you're in. So the Sunnis take a very, very puritanical view of Islam. The thing that Khomeini was able to play on was all the mythology and this symbolism of Shi'i Islam.
And so how quickly after the revolution was he able to consolidate absolute power?
By 1981, his faction was totally in power.
And how did the other various groups, like the women's groups and Marxist movements, feel about that?
Well, they were very much opposed, but they were pretty much busted by that point. They were very, very effective at counter-revolutionary activities. They were very effective as painting these people as being dupes of the West, being dupes of the United States.
Right. Just traitors in various capacities.
Right. You know, the Marxists were considered to be dupes of Russia, et cetera, et cetera. So
how did women's rights transform during that decade?
Well, the women's groups were repressed. It depends what you mean by women's rights, first of all. Women can vote now in Iran. I mean...
When you say now, like we're talking as of a couple years?
Yeah. I mean, the elections are fairly meaningless. I mean, because the candidates are well vetted. The thing about women's rights in the Middle East and other places as well is that some of the worst dictators are very, very good on women's rights. And the reason for that is because that's the last bit of patriarchy that the state hasn't been able to get into, is the family. And if the state can penetrate the family, if they can get in, behind the paterfamilias, they can control all of society. So what they try to do is to bust the power of the men controlling the family. And reach right into the family directly. Now, I'm not saying that the mullahs and the people who are running Iran are actually feminists in any way, shape, or form. They're certainly not. But I mean, the thing is that none of the people who purport to be feminists in the region really are either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the way that many Americans, especially of Persian descent, paint it is that Tehran went from like Amsterdam to Baghdad overnight.
Well, it changed dramatically. It certainly did. But I mean, basically, we saw the rebellions that took place in 2022, 2023 about the veiling, and women freedom, et cetera, were part and parcel of what the population felt as part of the oppression.
Do the opponents of those marches and rallies and feel like the women who are protesting are like falling victim to like Western influenced feminist propaganda or something?
This was widespread. This was not only widespread, but long-lived. I mean, this was the biggest threat to the regime that the regime had ever faced. So it was very, very widespread. So it wasn't just these, westernized, spoiled bourgeois women. This was something this is programmed misogyny against half the population of Iran. This is not only that, but this is a regime that is thoroughly corrupt, that is thoroughly repressive. I mean, look, when the regime gets its back up against the wall, they're willing to do go the entire gamut. So the Basij, which is a popular militia, they unleashed them on the demonstrators and the protesters. And what they saw was what the medical people saw, a large number of women who were shot in the genitals and the breasts, just to sort of like send a message.
Yeah, that's horrible. So as far as the 80s goes, can we break down the anatomy of kind of what that regime was like? I mean, were there any positive changes at all that happened for the people of Iran, the common folks?
Well, the 80s is skewed in a certain way because in 1980, Iraq launched a attack on Iran. And for most of the 80s, Iran and Iraq were at war. And when we talk about this is probably the bloodiest confrontation of the 21st century. Of the 20th century at that period, during that period, after the Second World War. And, it was up to 2 million casualties, maybe 1 million fatalities. You had cities that were being bombed. You had, that sort of thing taking place. The Iranians are now comparing what's going on with their war with Israel as being the same thing with the war with Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Where did the U.S. stand in the Iran-Iraq conflict?
Let them both burn. But we tilted towards Iraq to make sure that they would both burn. We weren't particularly friendly towards either regime, but we really were aghast at the Iranian regime, particularly after the embassy was taken over. And so the United States tilted towards Iraq. So we gave them intelligence information. We looked the other way when they used poison gas against their Kurdish citizens. We probably helped them more than just giving them intelligence information, but we don't know yet. This was when Iran-Contra was taking place as well. So on the other hand, there were deals being made with the Iranians in order to get American hostages released. So this wasn't the period of glory in American history.
Yeah, and crack cocaine was involved in that somehow.
Basically, this was something that, was a very, very intricate series of maneuvers that was done by the American intelligence, by the Iranians, by, the Israelis, et cetera, to try to figure out a way of getting American hostages released in a way that would enable Reagan to have that sort of a victory over, terrorism.
None of it worked.
It worked, taking hostages became sort of like a defeatist, not worth it.
I mean, the eradication of terrorism was unsuccessful.
The eradication of terrorism is not going to take place. I mean, we have this global war of terror, and the whole idea was, we're going to get rid of terrorism.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of murder, we're going to get rid of rape, we're going to get rid of burglary, we're going to get rid of any other crime. We can't get rid of it. What you can do is you can police it, and you can reduce the numbers, you can make the penalties higher and higher for trying to do it, and make the risk greater and greater, but you're never going to get rid of it. So the thing with terrorism is that it works, and certain times it works, certain times it doesn't work, but it's a tactic that people use, and you can't get rid of a tactic.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to the conversation about Donald Trump, because his policy, but when he was running for his campaign, was pretty much, let's kind of let them all burn. We don't want to get involved in Middle Eastern affairs. I'm going to put America first. I'm not going to spend your tax dollars subsidizing foreign wars, especially when we have so many problems here, like people can't afford to buy homes and eat and stuff like that in a lot of different places.
There is an argument to be made about that, and there wouldn't have been either an Obama or a Donald Trump had there not been for the 2003 war in Iraq. They both owe their political careers to that in large measure. And Obama came by it honestly, at least. He was anti-war from the very beginning. Trump claims to have been anti-war, afterwards. So what's going on right now is what many people in the America First movement believe is a betrayal. The idea of sort of being manipulated by the Jews again is not something that they want. But on the other hand, there's a certain amount of truth to this, which is the fact that in his first term, Trump handed American Middle East policy to Benjamin Netanyahu and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. The idea being that, he had a great deal of admiration for both of them. They got what they wanted, and they were able to accomplish what they wanted. At this point, I believe that, again, it was Netanyahu who was able to convince Trump that Israel is going to win this one. So you want to get on the winning side. So this will be an easy win for your political base.
Don't they have enough money and arms?
They could always use more. I mean, I read in the Wall Street Journal that they were running out of some of the anti-missile defenses.
Just the scary thing is like what they've done in Gaza. What's the current death toll? Is it above 56,000? Us, we're still cooperating with them after doing something like that. It's kind of giving them the green light to take it even further.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right on that. And, the whole idea was I could see in the beginning Joe Biden saying, okay, look, we won't have any leverage whatsoever over the Israelis because they're really going to, this one is really important to them. We won't have any leverage if we cut off weapons and that sort of stuff. So we'll keep weapons flowing. And that way we can perhaps persuade the Israelis to take it a little easier, maybe to go in for a ceasefire, something along those lines. Well, the definition of craziness is, or insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, hoping for different results. And, this was insane, the Biden policy. And now, what Trump's policy towards Gaza is just off the charts in terms of being ridiculous. The United States taking over Gaza, expelling its population, building a resort there, that sort of thing as well. So Trump doesn't have any real policy, so he's following Netanyahu's lead.
Yeah, because he's not very knowledgeable about the subject.
Right, he's completely inept on this subject, and he is somebody who not only is not knowledgeable, but he scorns knowledge.
I mean, wasn't he able to get a majority of votes in places that had large Arab populations, like Dearborn, Michigan?
It was a combination of them sitting on their hands and voting for Trump, because there's a lot of anger of, a couple of things that, for example, what Biden did during the Gaza war, and also the fact that, the Democrats were not willing to say that they were going to do anything different.
I feel like we've covered a lot of the stuff on the Harvard campus recently in terms of anti-Semitic versus anti-Zionist and the differences and stuff like that. Or not, let's just say anti-Semitic versus the nation of Israel. And it's unfortunate because I do feel like there will be an increase in genuine anti-Semitism in the U.S. over time. And it's kind of easy to fall into that trope. Not saying I'm falling into it, but sometimes you just think, is any politician allowed to stop Israel from what they're doing? Do we even have that power? And is it AIPAC funding? What is stopping intervention?
Well, it's not just AIPAC funding. The United States has got these long cords of mystic memory, as Lincoln put it, with Israel. We were supporters of Israel, pretty much all the way through the 70s to the present day. Kennedy was the first one who called Israel an ally. Israel was strategically important to us during the Cold War. Israel's interests and American interests have diverged since the end of the Cold War. And, we can see that with Netanyahu, who's constantly crying, wolf in terms of the Iranian nuclear, program. So he moved against an American president who was looking to cool down the Middle East. He was trying to figure out a way of getting Israel closer to the American allies in the Gulf and Saudi Arabia in order to create this anti-Iranian alliance. So, this is what's going on between Israel and the United States at the present time. Our interests have diverged. And so what Trump is doing is trying to realign American interests with Israeli interests, but he's doing it on Israeli terms, not on American terms.
Sometimes I think, what has Israel done for us except for put our people in danger?
Well, they'll take credit for a whole bunch of things as well. Israel was there for the United States in terms of American policy during the Cold War. The latter part of the Cold War was what's called offshore balancing, which is the idea that the United States is going to be offshore, but the people who are going to be policing the region are going to be the people within the region itself. So in the West, you had Israel. In the East, you had Saudi Arabia, and until 1979, Iran. And those are the people that were going to keep America's enemies at bay. So Israel was going to take care of Syria, Saudi Arabia and Iran were going to take care of Iraq, and make sure that the Soviets were going to be locked out of the region. And then with the end of the Cold War, with the threat no longer there, and with Syria undergoing its own, civil war and that sort of thing, Iraq being taken out of the picture, Israel and American goals diverged.
It just seems like, as far as keeping our enemies at bay in the Middle East, it seems like they've not only inflamed those enemies, but perhaps created new enemies all the time. If we get dragged into some sort of conflict with Iran that extends to anything close to an armed conflict where we have to deploy troops, or at worst a draft, there's going to be not only widespread anti-Semitism in the U.S., but also 9/11 every weekend.
Well, yeah, there's a real danger of that. The thing is that Israel's problem has always been with the Palestinians. Okay, in 1948, which you had the creation of the Palestine refugee problem, the idea of Palestinians demanding sovereignty, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes that's been masked in international relations. Sometimes it's been called an Arab-Israeli war or Arab-Israeli wars. It's not Arab-Israelis. The root of the question is Israel versus Palestine. Okay, and this is what happened on October 7th. The idea that Hamas did not want to see the Palestine issue abandoned by the international community. Israel immediately, Netanyahu began to make this into an Israel versus Iran conflict, not a Palestinian issue. The Palestinians became surrogates of the Iranians, became proxies of the Iranians, along with the Hezbollah, along with the Syrians. And so this has always been, as far as Netanyahu's been trying to define it, has been a conflict between Israel and Iran, and not Israel and the Palestinians.
It seems like there's really no solution for all these problems until that particular problem is.
There is a solution. It's not a military solution. I mean, the Palestine issue has got to be resolved.
So the two-state solution.
Two-state solution. I mean, ideal would be a one-state solution in which both peoples, can cooperate and live together and sing Kumbaya. That ain't going to happen. So a two-state solution is the ideal solution. It's getting later and later to be able to do that, though, and the Israelis don't want that at all. Now, apparently, the Americans are saying, well, we're not really serious about a two-state solution either. It's no way of telling. But the thing is that, again, Trump has been no friend of the Palestinians. Trump has been no friend of, a two-state solution either. So what he attempted to do in his first term was to create a two-state solution that was totally unworkable. In his second term, what he's attempted to do is to create a problem in Gaza that would be resolved by American taking over Gaza and the expulsion of the population.
What's Netanyahu's current approval rating inside of Israel?
80% of the population support the attack on Iran. Now, what his particular situation is that's really sort of like, that's less than the 80%, but it's still significantly higher than when he went into this war. And the idea being that, people are rallying around the flag in Israel. This is sort of like a dream come true, that this upsets the entire chessboard. Israel, if they succeed in this, has no enemies in the Middle East. They have nothing but an upward trajectory.
Yeah, we did a video recently called Israeli Hostage Transfer that analyzed some of the internal dynamics within the Israeli government and cabinet. And it seems like there's a faction in there called Jewish Power that's led by this guy, Ben-Gvir.
Yeah.
And they do not want a two-state solution. In fact, they want the entire region to be controlled specifically by Israelis and have everyone else expelled.
Right. I mean, if anything, the West Bank is far more important to them than the Gaza Strip.
And they've been applying a ton of pressure on Netanyahu to keep the war going for as long as possible.
Yeah. And Netanyahu's got pressure. So look, everybody talks about, why Netanyahu's in this thing, and regime change, is it, to get rid of nuclear weapons. There's two other reasons as well. One of which was to split up the negotiations the Americans were doing with the Iranians. The Americans were supposed to once again have another meeting with the Iranians the day after Israel began its attack. Israel attacked, so the Iranians called off the meeting with the Americans to perhaps, have some sort of nuclear agreement. And then the other reason is that Netanyahu is still facing corruption charges. He's going to spend time in jail if his government falls. So
it's really like a do or die situation for him. Not die, but like if his administration collapses, he automatically has to go to jail.
He will be convicted of corruption. There's little doubt about that.
And he's going to have to serve time in a...
Ehud Olmert, who was one of his predecessors, certainly did.
Wow.
So...
Would he serve time here?
No, he served time in Israel.
Oh, he'd be a really annoying inmate.
The thing that's important about it is that, at the present time, it looks as though Netanyahu's popularity is such that his government is not going to fall. And if that costs Israeli lives, if that costs Iranian lives, so be it.
So power versus human life.
Yeah.
What's going to win?
Oh.
Power.
Yeah.
I think the question on everybody's mind, and since you're kind of the professor, you're kind of America's professor, as far as I'm concerned, is World War III, yes or no?
No. No World War III. I mean, basically you have one nuclear power that's involved in this thing, including the United States. Then you get two nuclear powers that's involved in this thing. The other side doesn't have nuclear weapons yet. So I think that the way this is going to end up is that we saw today the response that the Iranians did to the Americans was fairly anemic. That they will probably continue to respond in a fairly anemic way. The idea being that we have to demonstrate the fact that we are going to respond, we're not going to take this, but fundamentally, we want you to lose interest. We want you to lose focus. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to accumulate as quickly as possible enough material to build a nuclear bomb.
So no cause for concern on the home front?
Right.
You're not worried?
Not at all.
Not even an ounce of anxiety?
There's possibility of terrorism. No nuclear terrorism, though. Well, standard operating terrorism, that could be pretty terrifying as well.
But not like a nuclear bomb.
Not a WMD, no.
If they did drop a WMD, which city do you think they'd go for?
I have no idea. I just so doubt that they would drop a WMD.
You don't think it'd be here, though, because it's too big?
I don't see the reason. It's not symbolically important enough. Los Angeles. I hate to say that to us Angelinos.
No, you're right.
But New York, Washington is probably far more important.
Not Philadelphia.
The cradle of American democracy? No, I don't think that. I mean, why was the World Trade Center and the Pentagon chosen? Because they're symbolically important. You know, they're beautiful targets.
Yeah, I've been reading a biography about Osama bin Laden, and kind of they talk about some of his journal entries, and one thing that he detested was the influence of what he saw as like urbanization in terms of planning in the Arab world and Islamic society, in terms of these dense apartment buildings being built, and, you know, to, I guess, emulate the commerce.
It's even worse though. They're building all these new cities, like Neom in Saudi Arabia, and there's Masdar City, and there's Silk City, and there's a whole bunch of them. They're rebuilding Cairo, for example. What is the one thing that none of these cities have? A place where people can congregate.
Yeah, there's no parks in Dubai.
Yeah.
There's just developments, resorts, indoor ski resorts where there's artificial snow.
What an oversight.
Yeah.
The whole idea is they don't want another Tahrir Square. They don't want protests to be able to break out in these places. They don't want people to be able to get to know each other. That's why one of the places that the Saudis are building is this place called The Line, which is this straight line city, so that people have very little contact with each other. It's not like a circular city or a huge city. Like, there's going to be no Central Park in any of these places. There's going to be no place that people can congregate.
So they're trying to engineer loneliness to prevent uprising as a result of discussion.
It even gets worse than that. What they're doing is they're creating smart cities. So these cities are, the average smart city, like, you look at, Zurich or a city like that, takes 10% of people's data. These cities are going to take 90% of people's data. And integrate it. They're going to know, they bragged, they're going to know crimes before they're committed, they said.
Yeah.
They're going to have their own special, judiciary in Neom. So
I went to Dubai once and I was fascinated because, you have all these buildings that are vaguely named after various important things in Islam. And you see scriptures, like one of the tallest buildings of the Burj Khalifa. There's some sort of there's various things in the architecture that relate to Islam. And they have that, I don't know exactly what the sculpture is, but it's this giant sculpture that I think is Quranical in some capacity. Yet as you drive down the main street in Dubai, all of the billboards are Hermes, Gucci. You see white Western models. Everything is Lamborghini, Ferrari. It's just this obsession with Western excess. And it made me realize the West has won, if not politically, through the consumer goods in our global marketing campaign.
The West has won in other ways as well. It's not just consumerism as well. It's sort of like, you have an Islamic Republic in Iran, for example, but it's an Islamic Republic. It's a model that was created in the West and was replicated around the world as well. This is something that, where in the Quran or the Hadith, the collection of the sayings of the Prophet, where in that is there the idea of a republic? Where is there the idea of a parliament? Where is there an idea of elections and that sort of stuff as well? These are modern states, and modern states follow a certain model. Now, the model is not necessarily borrowed from the West, but, all modern states have to do certain things. Yeah. And so, therefore, the Iranian state is just as modern as any other nation state. And that's why when people say, well, Iran, they're millenarial, they're crazy, they're, going to follow, the most puritanical forms of Islam or something along those lines, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. They're a state like any other state. They have got the same requirements as any other state.
Are there any Islamic cities or regions that still have that old school look, pre-industrial city format?
There's a lot of them. Because some of the places that were colonies or that were protectorates, they had modern cities that were built alongside the other cities. So the other cities with the so-called natives quarters, and then you have that. And right now they're very touristy in many places.
What do you think Osama would say is the most legit city in the Arab world?
Well, he would of course say Mecca, Medina.
Well, I mean,
which have been, by the way, totally rebuilt.
Yeah.
As well.
Gift shops and stuff.
Yeah. And huge clock, for example.
We obviously know he loves Mecca, but if he had to pick a third best city,
probably Jerusalem. Again, these are symbolically. Symbolically important. And we shouldn't look at, Osama bin Laden as being somebody who is sort of a primitive in any way.
Oh, no, not at all. I just mean, because obviously I'm not a supporter of Osama bin Laden. But I found it interesting that after 9/11, we weren't really able to figure out exactly why it happened because there was so much propaganda about like, he hates that we're free, he hates the supermarket, he hates the baseball game. And then you had to kind of dig deeper, and now I'm realizing what grievances created the capacity for that kind of terrorism.
The idea, each one of these groups has a separate strategy and a separate goal. What Osama bin Laden's strategy has always been is to vex and exhaust the enemy. So they thought that this is what happened in Afghanistan with the Soviet Union. They vexed and exhausted them. The Soviets put in a great deal of time, effort, money, blood, and treasure into the Afghan war, and they lost, and that caused a collapse of the Soviet Union. They expected the Americans to do things like invade Afghanistan to invade Iraq, and this would vex and exhaust the Americans as well. So the whole thing was a trap. We fell right into the trap.
And are we doing that again?
Yeah, we are.
How do we get out?
Number one, we should never have given up on the nuclear agreement with the Iranians. Number two, what we should do is figure out a way of resolving the Israel-Palestine conflict that will be to the satisfaction of people of good wishes on both sides. Now, there are a lot of people who aren't of those good wishes that are on both sides, but basically, there's got to be a just solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Hamas is still in power?
Hamas is still in power.
Forever?
Not forever, no, but I mean, basically, until there's an alternative.
What would that be?
There's no alternative on the table at the present time. I mean, there really is nothing. The Israelis are not suggesting an alternative to Hamas. The Palestinians can't. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, of course, isn't capable of doing it. The Palestinians in Gaza are probably not capable of doing it, and right now they're looking out for their own survival. Hamas is truly integrated into society. It's going to be very hard to eradicate. And so what's going to have to happen is going to be, you're going to have to learn to live with Hamas, or you're going to have to learn to live with some sort of Hamas substitute.
Would Israel fail as a state without our funding?
Probably not, no. I mean, Israel has got a fairly strong economy. It's got a high-tech economy. Even before the high-tech economy, Israel had, certain attributes that other states in the region didn't have. So Israel is fairly good in terms of, now in terms of American arms and American military support, that's absolutely necessary for Israel's survival. But if Israel were to become like any other Mediterranean state, just a regular Mediterranean state without this ambition that Israelis have, or the Israeli government has, then it could probably prosper like any other Mediterranean state would.
They would just have to calm down.
That's one way of putting it, yeah.
There's that. As mentioned before, a ceasefire between Iran and Israel was brokered by Trump 30 minutes after this interview, and we wanted to give you an update on how that's playing out. It's worth mentioning that this was recorded on June 26, 2025, so things might change, but here's where we're at right now with the situation. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran is holding for its third straight day following the deadly 12-day conflict between the two countries. President Trump announced that the U.S. and Iran are expected to hold talks next week, though he downplayed the need for a formal agreement on Iran's nuclear program, stating, "I don't care if I have an agreement or not." Meanwhile, Iran's parliament symbolically voted to suspend cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog, escalating tensions. Still, both sides have begun steps towards normalcy. In Tehran, residents have returned from shelters while schools and workplaces have reopened across Israel. Hopefully the truth stands and no more lives are lost, but given the history of the region, we're all just gonna have to cross our fingers.
Channel 5 Live worldwide, Hollywood and Vine.
Fuck the authority, Channel 5 News.
Channel 55. We don't fuck with custers, and 5 is the best number.
Hey, you. That's right, you. Are you a documentary filmmaker or a journalist whose work is being held captive by the fat cats at the Hollywood studios, or even worse, being held back by a tyrannical parent organization like Vice, Vox, and Mother Jones? Well, I have great news for you. Those days are over, because we are launching our own independent documentary platform called C5.now.
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 C5.now. It's going to be available on smart TV, iOS, and just a regular old computer. A lot of you guys might wonder what makes C5.now different than Peacock or HBO Max or Tubi, and the answer is residuals. I know some of you guys may think that residuals is an HPPD symptom, but that's not the case. It means the proportion of streaming revenue that you get paid after your movie is on a platform. Most people get 10% or 20% of residuals, but if you got a film on C5.now, you're gonna get 55% or more of residuals. Yeah, it's gonna cost money. It's gonna cost $5.55 a month, much like the Dear Kelly film. But the thing is, that money's gonna go straight to the director, straight to the executive producer, straight to the people who actually put money into the project itself. So we don't gotta fucking break off fat chunks of change for all these fat cats telling us how to think. So if you have something you want to submit, just do me a favor, email me that to submissions@channel5.news, and you too can be a part of C5.now. We're not gonna change your edit, but we will give some feedback if it's not that good, but it's almost there. Maybe less music. Put a little bit less music on there if you want to, but you don't have to. And that's key to channel5.now. Suggestion, not enforcement. And the best thing about C5.now is you don't gotta be 18 to sign up.
Content for all ages, not just adults.
We're gonna have documentaries for kids about the history of Roblox or how to succeed in Minecraft. Maybe we'll have some Mr. Beast stuff on there, not sure. Maybe even other languages one day. Mandarin Chinese.
Even if I spoke a different language, I'd subscribe.
Tagalog, that's the main language of the Philippines. Speak a bit of Navajo if you want. And the best thing about Channel 5 and C5.now is we're gonna take those proceeds and support local business. Puedo comprar dos. Gracias, amigo.
C5.now, everybody.